Alright, so the process of creating your own worm casting fertilizer at home begins in the kitchen. And you can see here we've got this little handy dandy composting bin that fits right under the counter. This is a really functional and clean way to collect your food scraps throughout the week. If you're interested in checking this product out, I will include a link below. And you can see here how it works. The container has a lip that just slides right onto the connector that you screw into the inside of the cabinet. And the cabinet door functions just the same way as it did before without the added weight. No issues to report. But regardless of how it is that you collect your food scraps and feed it to your worms, the key is to just do it. So this here is my bathtub worm bin I put together, and it's been working just great. You can see I've got a heat mat in here because we're in the middle of winter, and this heat mat just adds a little bit of extra warmth in there for the worms to stay active. I find that my bin remains very productive throughout the winter using this technique, as you can see. Not only do we have red wigglers in here, but we've also got some black soldier fly larvae surviving and overwintering in this system. Check out this nest of worms here. So both the worms and the black soldier fly larvae are doing a wonderful job continually breaking down our food scraps that would otherwise just go into the waste and to a landfill somewhere. And instead it's creating copious amounts of some of the richest, organic, highly nutrient dense fertilizer for our garden, completely free. Alright, so the way that my harvesting system works is you just feed certain sections of your bin at any particular time, not the whole bin at once, and by doing this, the worms will all migrate to wherever it is you're feeding the bin. So I stopped feeding the left side of this bin several weeks ago, and for the most part, all the worms, all the black soldier fly are gone. All that's left now is just a few stragglers. And it's absolutely fine if they end up in the garden. They're going to be happy, and they're going to help the garden to thrive as well. So this is the technique here, guys. There is no sifting. There's no other work to do other than to just scoop out those castings. If there's any food scraps remaining or some worms still in there, don't worry about it. Just add it into the garden and everything's going to do just fine. Now you know you've created the best worm castings if the material is not too wet and it's not too dry. And there should be no smell at all. These castings here are just perfect. So to scoop the castings out, I'm using this ice scooper, and I like this because it has a rounded edge, so there's no way I'm going to damage the liner in this bin. Just makes very easy work out of the whole process. So you can see in a matter of a couple minutes I got 2 full 5-gallon buckets of fresh worm castings. So I'm here next to a peach and a white nectarine tree. These stone fruit are some of the first to wake come spring. So I'm going to go ahead and give them a dose of this worm castings, a nice calm fertilizer that they can soak in and utilize throughout the upcoming season. When you've got an abundance of worm castings like this, there is no issue with using it like I'm showing you, just as a top dressing. I don't need to conserve. If I was buying this from the store, however, this would be, right here, this would be about $12, $15 worth of worm castings, and to really get the most out of it, what I like to do is make worm tea. And I've shown you videos on how I do that, but you can utilize a much smaller amount of the worm castings and proliferate the beneficial bacteria and microbes that are within by the billions. And then you can spray that through a foliar feed or through a root drench. And that's another great way to use the worm castings. Free fertilizer. And as a side benefit, we're releasing some of those red wiggler worms into the garden as well, so they're happy. So a quick tip for you when applying fertilizer in the garden, the best time is going to be when the plants are just beginning to wake up. So early spring, in most cases for fruit trees. For greens, you can apply fertilizer like this year round, no problem. I'm doing this now mainly for demonstration because I want you guys to be ready and prepared for this upcoming spring. But when applying your fertilizer, regardless of type, especially with fruit trees, but this goes pretty much for any plant, what you want to do is apply the majority of it around what's known as the drip line. And that's typically going to be about 3 to 5 feet away from the trunk of the tree when growing dwarf fruit trees. As far as your side branches extend, that's about where you want to target. And the reason why is because the new roots that are forming are growing at that drip line edge, and so they're going to absorb and take up most of the nutrients in that location. So I'm just going to go around this area and also take off some of these artichoke leaves, use them as chop and drop mulch. the food forest technique. Taking off the leaves of plants like the artichoke that are touching the ground is also going to help keep pests away. They can't crawl up the plant as easily. And this is one of the main reasons I love growing the artichoke. It produces a lot of this chop and drop mulch. And doing this doesn't hurt the plant at all. It actually helps them to thrive even more. But look at all this artichoke leaves. You can lay that on the soil surface. That's going to protect and keep that moisture locked in. Or you can do what I'm going to do, kind of break it up into smaller pieces. This just allows water and other nutrients to flow through a lot easier, and it'll break down quicker. We'll mix that in with the fertilizer around the drip line. Here we got some jujube branches from some prunings I did earlier. Lay that down. And there you go. Everything I've shown you today is part of what's known as a closed loop system. We created these worm casting fertilizer right here on site utilizing our excess food scraps from the kitchen. We took some of the artichoke leaves, broke them down, and applied them as a chop and drop mulch. And there you go. You've just added a bunch of nutrients and life to your soil, feeding your trees, your plants, what have you. Now we want to replace some of that material that we took out of the bin with some browns, and for the base I really like to use this coconut coir fiber. And this stuff works excellent. It breaks down, the worms will eat it, and it just keeps a nice consistency, a balance in your bin. But you could use other materials, but this is the way I do it, and it works wonderfully. You can pick this up online through Amazon. Again, check the links below for everything I'm mentioning in this video. I try to put it there for your convenience. But this particular coconut coir block that I use is nice because they rinse it first of any salts, so it's appropriate for gardening. Some coconut coir can contain salts that could be detrimental to your garden. So the way these coir blocks work is you just rehydrate them with a little bit of water. Depending on the size brick that you're using, it's going to use anywhere between 2 to 5 gallons of water. And I recommend going slowly, adding just a little bit of water at a time. That way you won't oversaturate this brown material and end up with a soggy mess. You want the right balance of moisture when you're adding these type of materials back into your worm bin. And you can speed up the process and help it along just by sloughing off and breaking up the brick as it continues to take up that moisture. This also helps you to determine how much more water you might need to add. Well, I can see the ladies have come around to check out what I'm up to. They're always curious when I'm out in the garden to see what I'm doing. Or maybe it's just they were hungry and wanted a snack of some greens, one of their favorite treats in the garden. Alright, so that took about 10 minutes total time, and we've got some really good coconut coir here. If you've got any little chunks left in there, you can just break it up with your hand. We got a nice consistency here. If you squeeze it really hard, you should get a little bit of water dripping out, just not too much. It should break up and fall apart. So now I'm just going to gather a couple buckets worth and bring it back over to the bin. So now I'm just going to refill the bin. I always use less material going back in than what I took out. That's because I'm going to be adding in some food scraps to this, and over time it's going to continually build up. So here's a nice start. You can also bring over some of the material that's already started to break down from the right, maybe pick up a few worms in the process, help to jumpstart this new section in the bin. But over time, all these worms are going to start to migrate over to this section now as I begin feeding it. And then I'll be repeating the same exact process and harvest from the center and then the right of the bin. So a very efficient system, quick and easy. So now we're just going to cover everything back up, and this is a coconut fiber. I buy this by the roll, and I love this as a material for the worm bin and for sheep mulching actually in the garden. But you can use anything as a top layer, newspaper, cardboard, and even the coconut coir isn't absolutely necessary to have a productive, balanced worm farm. You can use any type of brown material, whether it's straw, leaves, grass clippings. It just takes a little bit more work to balance out the moisture ratio by adding in more browns and paper over time, but you'll get there. Anyway guys, I hope this video was helpful or entertaining in some way. If you haven't already, I highly recommend getting into worm farming. Even if all you have is house plants, it's good for the environment, it can save you a lot of money, and produces top-notch fertilizer for your plants. Alright everybody, well that's going to do it for now. Until next time, this is Dan from plantabundance.com. Take care, I'll be talking to you again soon.